name is Joshua Mitchell, and I'm a software engineer at Aunt Bertha. Aunt Bertha it's a search engine for finding social services, like help finding food, shelter, paying bills, that kind of thing. Eventually, I just said, well, I want to do something at least that makes money and something that I at least, like in some capacity. And I had heard about writing software, and I was like, all right, well, sounds like computer science might be the way to go. So I finished up an associate's and then realized that most employers really want you to have a bachelor's. So I was like, all right, well, I guess I'm going to do a bachelor's. So I enrolled at Texas State and took another 2 years to get a bachelor's. And while I was at Texas State, I also looked into job descriptions for what it would take to actually land an interview. And I noticed that a lot of them wanted at least some prior experience, whether that be personal projects or internships. And so I decided to really try gunning for an internship. And that allowed me to land at USAA. And that's where I really started as a software engineer, but just as an intern. And basically the dominoes kind of fell from there. Typically, the education requirement for most people is a bachelor's degree, usually in computer science, but other tangential areas like electrical engineering, math, etc., where you took programming classes as part of your degree, that's usually what employers are looking for. It depends on the industry and on the job, but the most common jobs tend to be full stack, front end, or back end engineering jobs. And to quickly describe the difference, the front end is basically what you see as a client or as a consumer. For example, if you go to Google and you look at the search engine front page itself, where you enter in your query and you hit the search button or I'm feeling lucky, the people who mess with that are the front end engineers. Whereas whenever you type in a query and you press enter, that query gets sent off to some crazy faraway place, and then all sorts of calculations and services are ran. And that's what's known as the back end. The people who are kind of behind the scenes making those search queries visible or making them, parsing them and finding them. The people that kind of package that and then send it back to you, those are the back-end engineers. And then full stack engineers are basically people who do end-to-end, both back and front end. So, but to get more technical with each one of those, for front end, you'll definitely see HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and frequently other JavaScript libraries and frameworks like React, Angular, etc. And then for the back end, there's a lot of diversity there too. You can have Ruby on Rails if you're doing Ruby. You can have Django if you're doing Python. You can have Node.js if you're using JavaScript. And there's all sorts of other ones too that are less popular. But it's a lot of stuff. It can definitely be alphabet soup sometimes. Again, it depends on the job. For a lot of software engineering jobs, we actually don't care that much about certificates, but there are some where it can help you. And let's see, I'm not super familiar with CompTIA, networking jobs, but I know that Cisco certifications, those certifications, from what I understand, are actually pretty useful to help you get networking and IT related jobs. And as far as working on the cloud, for example, using Amazon Web Services or Google Cloud, being a cloud engineer, those certifications also help you in the sense that they really do help you like learn about how to use the cloud. You'll hear this a lot. It's kind of a cliche, but it's definitely true that communication is like one of the biggest things that helps you on the job, and it's also what employers look for in a large capacity. And what I mean by that is if you're reading a ticket and you have something you're trying to understand more or something you're trying to clarify, it really does help knowing how to examine who's reading the ticket. Like, is it somebody technical like a coworker, or is it somebody who's like really high level, like one of the executives? Is it a product manager? Like, really knowing how to tailor what you're writing for your audience really helps grease the wheels on being productive. Writing emails to clarify things, posting messages in like your Slack channel or your Google Chat channel. Just communication is super important because it can really reduce the scope of how long something takes, but from like, you know, a week to maybe a day, instead of like trading emails back and forth. You know, you can really succinctly phrase, this is what I need, here's what's blocking me, here's what you can do, here are the assumptions I'm making about where you're at, what you know, etc. And then, you know, if you're really communicative and really clear in what you're saying, then it becomes really easy for somebody to say, oh, that's all it is? Oh, you just need this. First thing I'll, you know, plug for is Stack Overflow. Like, that site has saved my and pretty much any software engineer who's done anything substantial's life, like over and over again. It's basically a community Q&A site for various software engineering questions and errors and stuff like that. And I would say it's probably like the dominant resource for pretty much anybody writing code. And oftentimes you'll find somebody who had your exact issue, and then you'll find another person who posted the exact solution, and you can look at it, understand it, and then you can just copy and paste it right into, you know, wherever your code is, and then it works. There are lots of forums. Some technologies have really good documentation. You know, they'll have like examples and clearly lined out descriptions of what everything does, and that really helps as well. Oftentimes your coworkers are the best place to go for anything, assuming you're doing this professionally. Often your coworkers will have touched that section of the code in some capacity, and they'll know exactly what's going on. But I would say that if you don't have any of that, then often it's really helpful to get handy with a tool called a debugger, which essentially jumps line to line through each line of code and basically makes very clear what's going on by telling you what values the variables have, at what point in the execution you're at. It's basically like, if you're a mechanic, it's like shining a light underneath the hood of the car so you can actually see what's going on. For me, at least, and this is very company specific, but I really enjoy and relish in the fact that the code that I'm writing helps people get help, especially in, you know, their dire time of need. I really take a lot of pride in the fact that everything I do helps people literally like avoid catastrophe, or it helps people who are out on their last limb, who are trying to feed their kids, who are trying to, you know, just like, who are like hanging by a thread. And like, my code can be what helps them get from on their last leg to being a happy and healthy person in our society. But as far as like the general job itself, I guess you could say, like, I don't know. I guess I just enjoy problem solving. Like, it's nice to have a very different problem day to day that you're always kind of starting from scratch as far as the problem goes, but the same skills that you applied previously, you can kind of jump right in with those. You get the best of both worlds in the sense that it's a totally new thing every day, but at the same time, you're not starting from scratch every day. You will be overwhelmed. It will seem hopeless at times. Like, I'm not gonna lie, there have been several times whenever I looked at this, giant wall of code that looked like hieroglyphics as far as I knew. And I literally thought to myself, how, like, there's literally no path. Like, there's no universe in which I can look at this code and understand exactly what's going on. I've found that, if you just take a deep breath, maybe take a walk, come back, and you just kind of start at, somewhere, like start at the top or start at whatever you think is the most important part and just think about it one line at a time. Typically, you can start shedding like those negative thoughts and actually like get into the zone and start making some progress. And you know that like you'll get there, and rinse and repeat until eventually you wake up and you look at that same wall of text and it just looks like plain English to you.